And we are live. Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to SpeakEasy Stage's Emerging Theater Leaders panel. I am Sabrina Victor and I am very excited to be here as the moderator for today's panel. And we have a really great hour planned ahead for everyone watching. So just a little bit about myself. I am Sabrina and I also currently reign as Miss Massachusetts USA 2020. And something, yes, that's me. Something that I'm really passionate about is performance activism and how we can use performance, theater, arts, and culture to shape our society, to change the stories that are being told around us. So I'm really honored to be here amongst so many amazing theater artists, especially, this being in this small Boston tight-knit community. So I think there is so much that we want to get to. And I did want to also mention that to whoever is watching our Facebook Live, if you have any questions or if you want to, ask direct questions for any of our panelists, please feel free to leave comments and we will try and get to them because we'd love you to just pick our brains. And I'm going to get started. So first and foremost, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we are on. While all of us present tonight are tuning in from different locations, I would like to at least acknowledge that SpeakEasy Stage Company and the Calderwood Pavilion it calls its home resides on the ancestral and unceded lands of the Massachusetts people, whose name was appropriated by this Commonwealth. We pay respect to the Massachusetts elders past and present. We acknowledge the truth of violence perpetrated in the name of this country and make a commitment to uncovering that truth. Thank you. So moving on to our panel. Part of SpeakEasy's mission is to champion emerging theater leaders, and that has never been more necessary than right now. As you can see, we are experiencing major shifts happening in the theater industry right now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, with the refocus on the Black Lives Matter movement, and with this recent switch to digital platforms for storytelling that we are all now experiencing. So I guess it's safe to say that 2020 has been a year so far of discovery and enlightenment and change. And SpeakEasy has noticed the strength and initiative demonstrated by our community's millennial and Gen Z populations, us younger folk. And we wanted to lift to the voices of those at the forefront of the work. So while by no means an exhaustive list of all the talented people working in this movement, we have collected a number of young professionals who have already established themselves as leaders in this field. So it is my pleasure and my honor to introduce all of our amazing panelists tonight. First, we have Pascal Florestal, who is a director, writer, the education director at the Front Porch Arts Collective, as well as the Arts Emergency Preparedness Coordinator with the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture. Snaps, 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 snaps. We have Tanisha Jones, director, actor, and disruptor, as well as the interim director of programs at the Theater Offensive. Snap, 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 snaps. We're getting everybody snaps. Next, we have Alex Lanati, director, producer, and the community programs manager at SpeakEasy Stage Company, also a member of the Theater Community Benevolent Fund. Snap, 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 snaps. We have John Meredith, stage manager, arts administrator, and producer, as well as the communications associate at Stage Source, where they help run the Gender Explosion Initiative for trans and non-binary inclusion and Line Drawn, initiative for harassment prevention. Snap, 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 snaps. We have Michael Rosegrant, a community organizer, director, writer, and arts administrator, who was also the co-founder of the Asian American Theater Artists of Boston. Snaps, 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 and claps. And last but not least, we have Alexis Shear, playwright, actor, and director, who is also the founder of Off the Grid Theater. Snap, snap, snaps. So we got quite a setup of panelists today. I am really just honored to be in your presence. Thank you everyone for taking the time to be here, and thank you to everyone who's watching today. So the way we wanted to formulate this panel was to have a free-flowing discussion so we could talk more in depth about the arts and culture scene in Boston right now and the challenges that we can identify within the city and how we as a community can directly address these issues and this changing landscape. So we're going to get right to it. Y'all ready? You ready to go? I need some snaps. Okay, so we're just gonna start it off just real general, overarching, this question that we should all ask ourselves as artists. What should our legacy be as arts leaders? So I am going to kick it off with you, Pascal, if you don't mind.
I love this question, legacy. I feel like, we're in this really great time where people have the opportunity to be captivated by the problems of the world and have to listen. I think for so long, like so many artists, especially artists of color, queer artists, artists with disabilities have been talking about these injustices that have been going on for eons. Like it's not a new problem, but I think, what's been this beautiful thing about the pandemic is that people have the time to sit and listen and have to confront it. And I feel like our legacy in this moment is to hold on to that and be able to respond and move that dial forward to this place that so many of us have been talking about for probably since we all started or wanted to be artists. I know for me, like I became an artist because it was a place where I could be myself in a place I never thought I could be who I am. And I think that's what's so beautiful about art. And so I think that's the legacy we are creating right now. There's such great art that is being created at this moment and a lot of innovation that is having to be made because we have no choice. This is what it's going to be for a bit. So we have to be creative and we have to get out of the box. And I think it's a whole paradigm shift. So I'm excited to see what's going to come out of it. But I think this is that moment, like we're in it right now.
Yes, and this is literally a moment in history that we are witnessing, that we are living through, that we are going to tell the stories about to the next generations. So I want to pass this question over to you as well, Alex, about your thoughts on what our legacy should be as arts leaders. Thank you, Pascal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a great answer to that question, Pascal. And you commented a lot that it made me think about access. Access is what I'm probably most passionate about within the theater. It's the focus of a lot of the work I do. I so strongly believe that the arts are for everybody, regardless of background, physical or mental abilities or finances. And I think we have a really long way to go until theater is an accessible industry, so that people not only feel welcome, but like actively included and wanted there. And I do think that the creativity that has come out of this time is already rethinking what theater looks like, who should be at the forefront, which voices we're lifting. So I feel like we are taking steps towards accessibility, but we have a long way to go. But I think that's what at least I would like my legacy to be, so is to continue opening the doors and pulling up the chairs at the table.
Thank you, Alex. And that's a really important point you bring up because, like we said, the landscape is changing and theater itself, just the institution of theater, the places we occupy when we create this art, it's all changing, it's all evolving, but it doesn't mean that we are where we need to be. It doesn't mean that, we need to stop. We have to keep going. So you talked a little bit about accessibility and how you want to see that, continuing to be a change in the landscape. So this segues into my next question. And I'm going to ask you first, Alexis. 10 years from now, deeper into your career, into all of our careers as arts leaders, as artists, what do you want the theater landscape to look like?
Oh man, I feel like, the people who are making theater obviously are leading with all of this great initiative and change. And I think 10 years from now, I really want to see that reflected in our audience. And I really want to cultivate an audience that feels welcomed into our theater, and, a theater audience that's made up of, what our country actually looks like. And I really want to cultivate an audience that is hungry for risk and, desires to be uncomfortable maybe, but, actually experience theater. And my hope is that with all of this great change that the theater makers are bringing, like we really just have that in our audience too.
I love that. Does anyone else have any responses about that? Michael, maybe?
Oh, sure. Sorry about that. Zoom clicking. But yeah, I think Alexis brings up a really good point, and it sort of ties into sort of what I was answering in my head about this legacy question, and that I want to think of my legacy not as a what, but of a who. So when I am talking about like where I want to go, I'm always thinking about who am I bringing with me, or who am I leaving a path behind for? And so in terms of like the theater landscape, I hope we bring this heightened focus on life that we're seeing in this moment onwards, so that we're really thinking about how do we best benefit our community and then all communities, right? So like what Alex was talking about in terms of access is super important. And there's this, focus in theater as an industry on like the canon and immortality and like permanence in this way that I think is actually really unproductive ultimately for us as a field, because then it takes and distracts away from the life and the stories that need to be told and preserved and passed down over generations. So I would love to see a landscape that is caring less about buildings. I would love for no Black trans woman's GoFundMe to be empty, but we can somehow fund the reconstruction of the Notre Dame overnight. I think that is a huge shift I want to see across culture, and that of course intersects with theater and our industry.
And if I may add to that, Sabrina, if cool, I want to uplift what like Pascal has said about our legacy being built in this moment. And I also want to lift everything that Michael has said. Things that I want to say is that this moment is a really big apex of our legacy, because it's in the how we deal with this moment, which is really important. There is an intersection that is happening right now between, us emerging leaders, us, leaders who are coming up with like some of the leaders who have been there forever, right? And there's a conversation that is beginning to happen. I am very thankful for all of those conversations, but what I will say, I think those conversations will boil down to how we treat one another, right? And our empathy and our ability to actually look over to someone like Michael and be like, hey, Michael, let me bring you up while I come up. Let me bring you up so I can hear about what you are going through and strategize moving from there, right? So if anything, I hope that like what comes to light is how we treat people, how we treat our artists, how we treat our queer artists, how we treat our Black artists, right? How do we treat our artistic directors? How do we treat our models? How do we treat our audiences? How do we usher them through this change that we are starting to go down? So that's where I am right now in that.
We preaching tonight.
Can I hop in here just on this in terms of legacy and this moment and specifically our generation, which I think like, gets a bad rap sometimes. We're like the coddled generation. But I actually want us to be known as the kind generation, and I want our leadership to be kind. And I really think that we need to just put the abusive geniuses behind us, because they don't serve us, they harm us. And I think asking not to be harmed in our workplace it's not a revolutionary ask. And I feel like that's it's a place that we need to start. And if I think in 10 years from now, we look at our leaders, I hope they're all kind.
100%. I could not agree more. I think that this is a really crazy time, and people are angry and scared, and quite honestly, all of us are grieving. And it's so important that we are working together and moving forward with compassion. I have seen so many instances of artists helping other artists and our community coming together to support one another. And it's been very inspiring, but there needs to be so much more of that as common practice moving forward.
And you bring me into a good segue for the next portion of this panel that I want to touch on, because, we're talking about just how we can become better people, how we can become, better servants to our community, to the people that we're trying to uplift, to the younger generation, to the kid that looks in the mirror and says, I'm never going to step into that production company. I'm never going to get on that stage. I'm never going to try and even work with that person because of, things they have witnessed or, it's time that we bring about this change, but we don't talk about it, that we be about it. So obviously 2020, it's been a crazy year, and arts organizations, they've been required to step up in a way that a lot of them have not done so previously, or a lot of them are, we're all being called to action, some people in a way they have never been before. So I want to talk a little bit more about the refocus on the Black Lives Matter movement in the past recent months, and how specifically the arts community has changed in response to that or needs to continue changing. So Tanisha, actually, if you wanna respond to that.
Oh man, that was a lot. What can you
I just said,
yes, no, I guess, I think the things I'll start with the things that I'm wrestling with personally, right? I am wrestling with, like, again, I always go back to the how, because as I stated, I think in the little comment that Alex asked me to put, is that this change is happening, we're on board with it, and people are here. The major consensus from all the communities I'm connected to, and I'm pretty sure at least some of y'all, because I work with some of y'all all the time, I know that the consensus from y'all's communities is that it needs to change, right? So I find myself more activated in the how. How are we going to create this change? And I think the call to actions that I'm trying to figure out is the call to action that's different between an organization versus personal action right now, right? How much of we as artists can we put the power back in our hands in our, like, I started this tweet, I started this Facebook status about terms of like engagement for organizations and what I will be asking organizations to do, and it blew up, which is really great. I'm really glad people are having this discussion, because it's a discussion that needs to be had, right? But for myself, I'm like, I need to put the power back into me, right? So how do I put the power back into me and saying my time is valuable and let me offer this to you, and here are the conditions with my time. I think for, organizations who are being called to action, I think a piece of advice that I will say is that direct and intentional action will always go over better than not indirect and not intentional action. So I thank you for, posting your Black Lives Matter things, all that stuff like that. But what we are really interested in are the specific steps that you are taking to further this action, right, of anti-racism. It's not just a moment, like Hamilton says. It is a movement. It is a long time coming. Hamilton's problematic, but I'm going to quote it anyway. So, like, that is what I would like to impart is, like, let's start thinking about how we can put the power back into those who are less enfranchised, like ourselves. Because I know that all of us, I've grown up with a lot of you here. I know that all of us have gone through our very much under enfranchised moments and have tried to struggle with creating that voice within ourselves. And so now that we have that voice, how are we giving power back to the younger us's is what I'm really interested in. So yeah, I'm gonna stop talking now.
Thank you for that. Does anyone have any response? I think you got some, Pascal. I see it.
Yes, everything T said always. But I think, the other thing that I'm learning from people who I admire and I love, like T, is to hold these institutions that we work with or work for, I should say, accountable. Because I think sometimes, it's easy in this work that we do as theater artists because there is no real way to get to where we want to be. There's so many loops and turns and things and places and incantations we have to make in order to get to where we are. And sometimes that means we have to give up a part of ourselves, or we have to make compromises because that's theater. And I think, what I'm hoping, and I hope for myself too, is to hold ourselves and these institutions accountable to that work. Like I'm sick and tired of seeing the same kinds of seasons, and I want to work with the people who are trying to make the right kind of theater, or at least the theater that I hope for. And if you're not about that, then that's fine. You're in that lane and I'll be in my lane. And I think, that's where we're at this moment. And I think a lot of this pandemic is going to show us who will be able to stand and who can weather the storm. And I think that's going to change a lot of how we approach the work. And I hope that people are able to see that there are people there who want to work with people like us. And I'm looking at this panel here, and so many of us I know have worked with so many people who I know if it weren't for those kinds of people, we wouldn't be where we are today. And those are the people that I want to continue to uplift, because they're actively making the changes that we have been looking for, that have been given us this opportunity, this platform to be where we are. And so that's what I'm really trying to hold on to now, is to hold myself accountable, hold them accountable, because it's time to let it. I'm not here to compromise my morals anymore, because it's too late. It's over.
And one thing I'll add to what Pascal is saying that is making me think about is, earlier in our conversation, we really talked about around flexibility, right? And around learning from mistakes. I think that a lot of people in the artist world are really afraid of making mistakes because of this nonprofit model that we have built, right? But mistakes is innately a part of our artistry. It's what we do in every rehearsal. It's what we do in every draft of a plan and everything like that. So I want to encourage us in this Black Lives Matter movement, figuring out how we're moving forward with gender equity, with all of this stuff, right? Is to make mistakes. If we put in place an accountability model, it can change, it can grow. It is a living thing. Yeah.
And that word, accountability, I think it really scares people sometimes. It has this negative connotation, but it's actually a really beautiful thing that, you know, even when you grow up as a toddler, you start to learn how to take accountability for your actions, you know, and you say, I didn't mean to steal the donut, but I did it. You know, I did it. And it's time that we put that more into our practice, just as human beings. So a lot of arts organizations, they're starting to, you know, become faced with the realities of their responsibilities to the communities that they serve, and how they can take accountability for you know, how they are operating as a company or as a community, as a nonprofit. So a lot of these orgs are starting to reconsider their staffs and their board makeup, and who decides what happens, who decides who gets to tell the story, what story is being told. And a lot of these places, they're looking at their equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives. Do you think that is enough? And I think I also want to stress that when we think of the phrase diversity, equity, and inclusion, sometimes people, they'll put that phrase in a box and they'll think maybe just about race, or they'll think just about gender, but it encompasses so much. So I want to get you in here, John. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of theaters that are just trying to talk about diversity in like the really simple way of like, we're going to get a trans person on stage, we're going to get a Black person on stage, bam, we're done. And I think to really do that work, it is like hard and difficult and uncomfortable, and like not only hard in the uncomfortable way, but like it's requires looking deep into things that you don't even, you see as so normal that you wouldn't even question them. But things like the schedules we have of like, in a neat contract in New England, the average week is like 36 hours. Who has time for that? Especially if you're getting paid $300 a week. Like, you need to be having another part-time job, maybe a full-time job along with that. And then you get a 10 out of 12 and you're working like 48 hours in 2 days. So just like from scheduling alone, you've knocked out so many people who literally cannot afford to be in the arts. And there's just like so many practices that are just like the norms that you don't think of in that box of equity, diversity, and inclusion. But there's so many steps along the way to like getting people in the room and getting people on stage telling their stories accurately that are just like these immense barriers that you don't even think of.
I also actually, John, I want to touch base a little bit more on the work that you're doing on the Gender Explosion Initiative at Stage Source, because a lot of companies are reevaluating their inclusivity and their safety practices, specifically in terms of gender. So can you just tell us a little bit about that work?
Yeah. So the Gender Explosion Initiative, we've been meeting, well, we've stopped meeting recently, but when it really started going, we held a gathering of a bunch of trans and non-binary artists in New England to basically just talk and open up about what they were experiencing in New England, where they were seeing barriers and where they saw people doing well moving forward. And one of the things that's been similar with the Black Lives Matter is there's a lot of performative action. There's releasing of statements, or there's like on a Trans Visibility Day, they'll post something. Or one thing we notice is a lot of places are starting to do gender neutral bathrooms. So like that's a cool and awesome and amazing step. but you need to bring it further. Like, that's not enough. What are you doing behind the scenes? So things like reevaluating how you talk about gender in casting calls, or even how you treat people in the room. Like, are your staff, are your directors trained to deal with trans and non-binary people if they're in your room? Because otherwise they're going to come in and they may have an awful experience and never work with you again, or something goes wrong and they speak up and this person may be labeled as a troublesome actor and they won't get hired at your institution again. So there's so much groundwork that needs to be laid before you bring people into the room, to make sure that they're actually safe and truly included when they're there.
Snaps and claps, y'all. Thank you. Thank you.
Jump off of that. I think that for a long time, arts organizations like had the values and had the dreams of being fully inclusive, accessible, welcoming places, but that's not enough. I mean, it's the amount of resources that you do have to invest so that you are providing truly equitable opportunities. It is, you have to be passionate about it and actively go after that work. And I think one of the positive things that the enormous disruption that is 2020 is doing is it is forcing companies to finally put their money where their mouth is and make these active decisions, invest the resources, and make the change.
Yeah, Alex, I'm gonna uplift what you said and also alter it a little bit, if you don't mind, just for me and for other people. Is that I do think that theaters have the intention of being inclusive, but I do think the leaders of these organizations tend to be cis white men, right? Mm-hmm. So the knowledge of what it means to be inclusive when you're not living it every day and that is not in your experience, is sometimes hard to change and educate on. So I that's why I'm only a little weary of saying they've always been wanting it, because you can want it but not know specifically what actually it is you have to do.
Want it very nebulously, right?
Yeah. So that's why I want to be really conscientious when we say that.
Thank you.
Anyway.
And I just want to uplift one thing. T said this earlier, like even the model of the nonprofit world is set up for that. It's not set up in this way of a collective mindset. And so I think that's the other thing that we're seeing now. You know, I'm hearing people, I'm hoping that it's a real movement. People want to break away from this model, because I think that's the problem with it in and of itself, the way that we have the hierarchy and how we value what kind of work matters and who and what matters is so much rooted in white supremacy. And I think until we're able to break out of this model, especially in art, because I can't imagine, you know, like being a painter and having to talk to a CEO about development, you know, like as a theater artist, these things that we have to deal with because of the way our work is just modeled in is so much harder. And I think until we break that apart, that's when things can really change. Michael,
thank you, Pascal, for adding that verbiage, because man.
Yeah, I just want to really quick jump in here and speak on a thread that I'm noticing around this part of our conversation, which is this idea of sort of shifting the culture and shifting the like why of doing this work. Like, oh, you say you want it, but do you understand why it's needed? And so I think part of this shift that needs to be ushered in by us and held accountable, you know, we have to hold people accountable for this change, is shifting nomenclature. I think the way we talk about these things needs to radically change and be open to radical evolution as we are in the doing of it, because we literally may wake up just every day and be like, oh, wait a minute, this way in which we were conceptualizing this thing we thought we knew how to talk about, actually it's way more nuanced than that, because, oh, white supremacy did it again. It made us believe that this system does work for us or does serve us, or, oh, it's made me think I know all the answers, when really that's never possible. So I think we really need to shift away from this mindset of doing enough, as if enough is possible, even as an abstraction, you know, because that in and of itself is reliant on the white supremacist myth of scarcity. And that myth is very real in our culture, in the way we interact with each other. We keep thinking, oh, like there is a finite amount of, I talked about this in my little quotation, but it's like, there's a finite amount of love. There's a finite amount of process, of progress. There's a finite amount of time. And really, that's just so not true. We are really, really capable of a radical imagination of a future that is better for all people. And we have to talk about the ways in which that is possible and why we are being prevented from thinking of it as possible.
Yo, I agree. It's the scarcity economic and thought process, right? And I do it as well. I operate out of scarcity all the time, and I have to have that rewiring of my brain of like, no, these things are not scarce. Tanasia, come on. And for some people, they are scarce, right? Like I'm not gonna lie, there are people in which they are scarce. I was there when growing up. So how do we change that? Oh God, and also blame, oh, white supremacy did it again. It's gonna be my next hashtag.
You guys are dropping some gem quotes tonight, so thank you for that. Really, everyone's just preaching, and I'm here for it. And I have a really good friend, her name's Sabine, and she always asks this question, and I never realized how hard it was for me to conceptualize what the hell she was asking me, because she'll always say, you know, she always uses the term radical imagination, like you said, Michael, and like in a radically imagined world, what would your perfect world be, or what would it look like? What would change look like? And I'm just like, sis, what? I'll try, because I'll try and think, and I'll ask myself the question, and I'm like, I don't know if we take the time to ask ourselves that. We say we want to change, but then, you know, or like these companies, they say, yes, we want to change because we want to be a part of the fight, and we want to, you know, become better. Why? Do you know why you're doing it? Is it because, you know, Sally next door is doing it? Shout out to all the Sallys watching. But why? You know, so thank you for those thoughts. We're going to segue a little bit because, you know, this would not be right if we didn't touch base on the COVID-19 pandemic and how it is currently influencing the arts. So we are seeing some of the biggest challenges in our community caused by this pandemic, not only, you know, within our city, but within the New England region, within the country, within the world. This is a global issue. And we've seen the different ways organizations are being affected by this. So what are some ideas that you guys have about getting creative with programming and technology, especially in a world where in-person performance is not guaranteed at the moment? Anyone take it away?
I mean, that's an enormous question, isn't it? COVID-19. Yeah, so obviously there are a million challenges that we're going through with the pandemic, and I think one of the biggest ones affecting all of us is the dichotomy between wanting to go back to work so that you can sustain your life as an artist, and then wanting to not go to work and not risk your health. And that's a problem for individual artists, but arts organizations as well, as how to balance that. And I think the solution is creative programming. And I think right off the bat, everyone was kind of floundering a bit of like, what can we do through Zoom? But people have gotten really creative. I mean, like SpeakEasy is doing a weekly play discussion club, which has been really great. I want to shout out Arlequin Players. They did an online interactive live performance. That was one of the most creative uses of technology I've seen. Like we all miss being in a theater so much. I do desperately, but I think we just have to focus on doing something different until it's safe for us to do what we used to do. And even that, I mean, maybe we don't ever do what we used to do. Let this be the reason that we start to be creative and start to ask ourselves, what is theater? What is art? And yeah.
What is theater? What is art? Alexis, do you have any thoughts?
Well, first I want to shout out to Sparkhaven. They're doing this incredible Zoom anthology of plays called Camp Strangewood. I'm writing one of the plays, and it's just an extraordinary group of Boston artists. And I think the first one starts Sunday night. So,
Sunday at 8 p.m.
Yeah, so like
y'all.
and on like Instagram, and you can watch all those things. But I want to kind of go back to the previous conversation and kind of marry it with this conversation. I'm thinking a lot about education and arts education, and particularly thinking about how COVID-19 is going to have probably a terrible effect, especially on public school arts education. I'm here because of excellent public school arts education in Miami, and I'm terrified about it. And thinking about all of the change that we're seeing and we're demanding in these arts organizations, we also need to be demanding them of our higher education arts and degree programs. And when I think about this radical imagination and dreaming of the theater utopia I want to make and see, in the next few decades, none of it is possible if we don't make arts education accessible, and if we don't lift the financial barriers that make it prohibitive for so many communities, and especially for so many people and perspectives and stories that we crave. And the theaters, they want, the theaters who want to do the good work, they're looking for these stories. And I think we get more of them when we, fund these programs. So that's important. And I'm thinking about education.
Yes, arts education, it needs to be a priority, definitely, is what you're saying. And I think that it does fall by the wayside sometimes. And just thinking ahead to the fall, I feel for educators and for elementary school programs and middle school programs, and just I think that it's up to us, some of us here, emerging arts leaders, in addition to the people in these spaces, and thinking how we can change programming and how we can offer this education that already was we weren't doing too hot with arts education, I would say, because something that I'm really passionate about in my life is performance activism, and how we can get to marginalized communities that already lack access, that are not ever exposed to the arts, to students who just they don't read plays, they don't go see shows, they don't so now here we are in a pandemic that is making it even harder to make these things accessible. But we have the beautiful wonders of technology, and we can reach so many people with technology. So I'm excited to see just what's going to come out of that. I do have a question from Audrey Seraphin, who is watching our Facebook Live. Hey, Audrey. So a question for all you panelists: what does the American theater have to sacrifice to move forward and survive the pandemic? That's a question. Hit it off, Pascal.
It's fragility. That's all.
That's it. Uplift, snaps, claps. Anyone else?
I think we need to slow down. Like, everyone wants to produce and get those plays out there and make more and more and more. But as we mentioned, you need to put your money where your mouth is. If you're putting 500 plays out there and you can't afford to get an intimacy director, to pay your actors, to hire understudies so that your actors don't have to come in when they're sick and dying, then why are you making theater? What is so important that you're putting on stage that you can't afford to do the real work? And I think part of that involves just slowing down and doing the right work. Tanisha has that lovely quote that I always misquote: there's always time to do the right work. Is that it?
Yes, there's always time to do the right work. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like building off of that, thank you for the segue, John. I think that there are, like, going off of what John said, there's always time to do the right work. But I also think another thing that is very important is asking the question constantly of, like, what can I do with the people that are in this room, right? I think as artists are so multifaceted, and especially as millennial artists and Gen Z artists are very multifaceted. And if you have us on your staff, Like, ask the question of what can I learn from this person that I didn't know before? Because 9 times out of 10, they're the people who are doing that anti-racism work. They're the people who've gone to that workshops, talked to those people on the ground, all that stuff like that. So if like push comes to shove and you're like, I can't do that, figure out what the people on your staff can give you, right? And you can talk about right then and right there.
But do that mostly by listening, not forcing that person to be your private educator. Because do the work.
Yeah. And then pay them. And then pay them. Yes. Pay them. Compensate us for the work, because it is valued. If your work is valued, so should our intel and our knowledge.
Yes. I love that. All right, I got some more questions for you guys. I'm going to try to get them in here before we end soon. Kitty Drexel asked if some of you guys could talk a little bit about casting locally, casting New England, and how NYC casting and bringing people here, how does that, possibly change the makeup, if that's detrimental or helpful to our, community here?
Let me just shout out real quick that part of what we're talking about in terms of like special technology infused programming that we're seeing right now, my amazing, I don't know, I say partner in crime, but if the crime is like excellence, then I guess charge us as guilty. But my partner in crime, Sarah Shin, she has been programming this incredible series of play readings with almost all local actors, playwrights, directors. I'm talking people who have not made it, to the Boston regional theater scene or whatever yet. And it's been like a sort of semi-weekly series. The next reading is tonight at 7 p.m. Tune in on our Facebook at Asian American Theater Artists of Boston, ATAB. Her work is really incredible. Her curation has been really incredible. And then at the start of the pandemic, I just want to highlight that Alex mentioned, like, there was a sort of like lag period where theaters were like, oh, what do we do? What do we do? Someone who knew what to do was Allison Chu from Chuang Stage over at Emerson. I mean, she was rolling out programming like March 20th, which was when I started quarantine. I was just amazed. So yeah, I think looking locally at the people in our community is crucial, because I mean, they just already are doing it. So like, opening the eyes is really crucial, and directing people in power to the people who have, the ideas and just haven't been given the possibilities and the pipelines necessary to enact them on larger scales than they are capable of.
Yes, I always say exposure and experience. And I think we have to work on giving people that more. So thank you so much.
And I think this has been an issue that a lot of people have dealt with in Boston for a long time. It's like there's so many people who are going to school here and learning here, and then they're leaving here. And the reason is because they're not able to get sustainable work and make a living as an actor. And so I'm hopeful that all of this change and all of this accountability that we're demanding of arts organizations right now will actually help our community to grow and to thrive and to support one another, and so that people will want to stay here because there's work.
And there's talent, right? And there's talent.
Yes.
There is such rich talent here. And it always, my favorite is when I see actors leave and then they come back. And I'm like, why did you leave? And of course, that we all get it. Like, I know so many of us have to think about that because that's a reality. But I hope that one day that doesn't have to be a thing. But I think I want communities, especially theaters, to invest in what is already here. Like, there is so much here. It's crazy to me when I see so many theater companies and like maybe half of their cast is from New York or out of state. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you're costing yourself more money by bringing that person out of state, trying to find them housing. And that's always my favorite, when they have to try to find people housing. And it's like, there are people here who live here who know this community. Invest in them. And you have no idea how much they will give back in that way too. So that's, I just want people to understand that there is such value in that.
And I just want to real quick ram in here.
Get in there.
Asia, but also with the discussion of talent, yes, there is a wealth of talent here. And we also have to acknowledge the real presence of reconceptualizing what talent means to us. So one of my favorite mentors and theater artists, Sarah Porkalab, who has performed at ART and works in Seattle, she always speaks about how she reframes talent not as like something innate necessarily to each individual, but as access to resources and opportunities, right? So like I am here like quite literally in this Zoom panel because I come from a wealthy family in Virginia. I had a great public school education like Alexis was talking about, and we need to, in part of changing our culture, we need to sacrifice like pride, so much pride around like, oh, I am this and oh, I can do that. Like, yes, I can. And oh, it's because, haha, in capitalism, I was born lucky. Okay. And we don't talk about that enough in the arts field, not nearly enough. And that's why they're looking to New York, they're looking to these other places, because it's like, they're literally not looking for the potential that exists around us because we are trained not to. We are trained to look for excellence when really we should be looking for humans and people and possibilities.
Yes, and that makes me think a lot about my experience even graduating college in 2018. And then, I went to school in Western Mass. So then I came back home, lived near the Boston area, and I was like, I don't know what to do. How do you go about, who do you talk to? How do you get your foot in the door? How do you, I don't know. And I think that, if me being a college graduate, having that hard of an experience, I just can't imagine just, people who, or even just someone who just wants to experience theater for the love of it. And they don't know where to go. I think my first big thing was I went to the Stage Source Expo. And that was like the best decision I ever made. Cause I'm like, wow, I never knew half these companies were even here. You can't find
Stage Source.
You can't find it on Google. You can.
I mean, and I think like Sabrina, you're talking to a very important thing. I think all of us, like, the reason we are leaders is because someone invested in us and invested their time and their resources into us. And I mean, I will talk for myself. I know me that's the reason, is because I invested myself in relationships, and I invested myself into knowing individuals thoroughly. Last thing I'll say too, on the back of what like Michael has said and Pascal has said, everyone has said basically here, is that the idea of leaders, and I've talked to Pascal and Alex about this, and John Jesus about this, is that the word leaders, very much, I had to wrestle with my own ideas about it. And that is because it's not because I'm not a leader, I think I am, but it's because I am not interested in another person unless they are interested in being a leader with me. And that is also for our youth, for our people who are just starting in the industry, right? Like, if I see a person, like I see Lorraine Hansberry going off on this, right? The reason me and Lorraine's have like a really, really awesome connection is because literally I was like, you are gonna be a leader. Let us talk about this. Let us keep going, right? I knew that she was in that fight with me. So that is what I'm interested in moving forward. I'm interested in how we invest in our future leaders, and as well as how our past leaders or our leaders who are current standing invest in us, right? That's what I'm interested in.
I love that. Thank you. I want to ask one quick final question before I get to our end point. So we'll just spend a little bit of time on this. A question from Sierra Sade Wade, or maybe it's Sade. Sorry, girl. How can we hold Boston theater accountable for actually following through on these goals of equity, diversity, and inclusion? And what's at stake if they don't? That's a good question.
I think part of that is on the theaters themselves. Part of releasing these accountability statements that are coming out left and right now is saying what you're going to do and putting the steps in place to hold the public accountable. So say we're going to get hiring quotas to XYZ, and then in 3 months, letting the public know if you're doing that. Like, you need to integrate that into your system of making sure that people can, and the people in your organization can hold you accountable.
Yeah, transparency.
I don't know if you guys have heard of this new Instagram account called Pull Up or Shut Up, I think. And initially it was initially just makeup based. So the creator just was calling or makeup brands, let me see your stats. Let me see your board of directors and your makeup and who's working at these companies. I want to see it. And these companies were, they were providing their information and they were saying, yes, we recognize that, this needs to change. And it stinks that, we had to, be inspired to change because we had to share these statistics with you that we, weren't sharing before. But then it surpassed past makeup, and now it's been, PayPal and Google and all these big companies. So just definitely look up that Instagram account. It's so amazing. But I think it's important that, we ask for this transparency, yes, but then what do we do after that? Okay, so you have a 90% white board. You have maybe 3% Latinx. You give us the statistics. Then what are you going to do about it? Are you going to, try and go to do more diversity hiring? What are you going to try and, give us shows in your seasons that, you don't want to just do, here's the Black show, pat on the shoulder. It's these things that are just, like you said, it's the nuance. It's why are you doing it? How are you going to do it? How are we going to hold you accountable? Are we going to go and create our own spaces? If you can't get it together?
I want to hop in on that because I've been thinking a lot about how do we hold and how do I personally, as an artist, how do I hold theaters that I want to engage with accountable? And I think it's owning that I do have power and actually you need me more than I need you. And I think it's, it comes down to contracts and what does it take for you to put on one of my plays? Like, I'm going to ask for things in my contract that you have people of color, that I'm not the only, that the rest of the season isn't white and I'm not like, I'm the token Latinx play. And I think it's just, to pull a page from Melissa Strada, even though we're like abolishing the canon, it's withholding the goods unless you change. And like, I want to see the receipts.
Yes, that's it. Yes.
I want to CC John in here real quick. John, what is that organization that we shared an office for at Stage Source? Luke works there.
LA, Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts.
Yes, Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts. I want to encourage every young artist, any artist in general, to go check out that website and contact those individuals, as well as look at their website and see what workshops they have. They do in-depth workshops about contracts and how to protect your rights as an artist and what you can request and what you cannot request. Get the power back in your hands and know what goes into your contracts. Know and read your contracts. That's all I have to say.
Yes.
You own your.
And I just want to uplift again what Alexis said. It's extremely important that we remind ourselves of our value. These companies want us. They talk about us. They want to hire us. So if they're not doing the work, we shouldn't be going there. Like, I'm okay with it. I can leave you. I don't need you. I don't need you one other white theater that continues to uplift white male narratives instead of look at everybody else. And I think that's our power, right? There are so many companies that are looking to us to help them. So we need to invest ourselves with those people and take away the people who are trying to not only take our talent, but not compensate us what we are valued at. Not even half of what we are valued at.
And that means everyone, like especially so many young artists. I see they get their contract and they go great and they sign it. Step one, ask for more money. At bare minimum, always ask for more when you get that contract.
Always.
They have it budgeted. Even if it's your first show, even if you think that you don't have enough credits for it to be worth it, ask for more money, ask for more because you're worth it.
Oh, I never thought to. First contract I ever got, I was like, oh, I got a contract. Woo, that's it. I didn't look at it. I said, signed, sealed, delivered, I'm yours.
And I think another thing I will say is emboldening is like these interviews, when you have interviews for stuff, right? That person is interviewing you as much as you are interviewing that organization and holding them accountable, right? I think that and this is something that a lot of you probably have heard me repeat, but one of the things that I say in interviews all the time is that I don't code switch. And to different people, that means different things. You get what you get with me, right? And if you have any questions, I am relying on you to ask me to clarify, right? I'm not gonna spend time going in depth to make sure I've been heard or understood. So that is one thing that I have said in every meeting that I go into. But I think all artists can have those things.
Yes, Tanasia, those expectations are so crucial, and something that I am channeling and manifesting more for myself is just like, I don't have to speak on this because my ancestors have. Listen, like, these people been writing about this thing. Oh, so you claim to be down in whatever way you claim to be down. Okay, well, according to this, theory and this background knowledge, I can talk about how this particular line of action you're taking is actually out of line with that. And so speak to me on that, read that resource, and then we can begin to have this nuanced conversation that we may need to have. But until we are on the same bottom line, like, establishing bottom lines is crucial. Like, I cannot speak to a person if they don't recognize that the United States of America is built on blood, period. That is it. Like, that is it. Almost every country in the world that isn't under indigenous sovereignty is built on blood. And until we start from that fact, I can't have any sort of serious dialogue with you about diversity, inclusion, anti-racism. None of these buzzwords matter to me if you are not accepting history, okay, outside of the white narrative that you have been grown up in. And it's not your fault. And here's the other thing, is I am not angry at you for not knowing, because white ignorance is a symptom, it is a manifestation, it is a product of these systems too. However, once you have been enlightened to otherwise, if you do not act and take your own responsibility after that, then that's where my fire and my loving rage can be channeled towards, at, and with you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone. This has just been so phenomenal. Just getting to, hear all your thoughts and picking your brains. And it certainly got me thinking about just the spaces I want to take and the way I want to move, moving forward. So before we go, I want everyone to quickly just share a piece of advice for the theater community at large, or for artists within it, for those of us who are looking to learn and to grow from this time. Just anything that you want to leave everyone.
We at time already, man.
I know, right?
I know. I could just talk to this group of my friends all night. So,
but we can't go without everyone, giving a little something from the heart.
Well, first, before I give any from the heart, I just want to plug something, which is the Theater Community Benevolent Fund. We're in a really difficult time for a lot of people right now. And so if you or anybody is struggling through this, TCBF is there to provide discreet, judgment-free financial support to artists struggling right now. And we talked a lot about lifting each other up, and so please check that out. As far as a final piece of thoughts, I mean, maybe it's a little too optimistic of me, but I just wanted all of our conversations about us sort of all being in this together has really inspired me tonight about the fact that there is enough room for all of us at the table. This is not a time for competition. It's time for us to help each other and support one another. And that's what I've learned most through these past few months, is the only way to grow and improve and work towards the better arts community is when we are lifting each other up and pulling up chairs to the table.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll just go down my grid. John?
I would say just stop caring what people think. I think one of the most freeing things for me was just stopping giving a shit. And especially for younger artists, you're afraid to speak up and speak out when you see something going wrong. But I think that can be the ideal time. If you're an unpaid intern and you see stuff happening that is wrong and that you want to question, speak up, because what are they going to do? You're an unpaid intern. They fire you. You don't lose any money. And if you do speak up at any level and you get pushback and people don't listen and they label you as whatever, that's not an organization you want to be working with anymore. So just speak out and make a better world for yourself and for the people who fill your shoes in the next production.
Thank you, John. Pascal?
It's funny, I'm in this weird place because I'm helping the city of Boston with this whole moment. And so for the time of COVID, and this is from Adrienne Marine Brown, but Harold Stewart says all the time, I want us to all move at the speed of trust, because the world is changing and we all need to just move at that speed. That is more important than anything else. Alex said, bringing people to the table. I want to bring people to the table, but if we have to build another table, let us build that other table and welcome the people who are meant to be there, because that validation is just as important, and honestly, way more important than any other validation that we need. And I always want to try to continue to uplift the communities that not only are of color, but are queer, but are disabled, are deaf, are hard of hearing, who are never at the table. And those are the people that need to be here too. And I want to continue. That is my, my force, my mission right now, is to make sure that we are all at the table. And if we have to build another one, let's do it. I'm ready.
Let's keep building tables.
Whoever can do the carpentry, let's get him in here. Thank you, Pascal. Alexis.
So the big thing I've been meditating on in my artistic practice in the last few years, particularly when I started like wearing the playwright hat more often and found that that's where I resonated the most. I've been meditating a lot on joy, and I think playwriting is what brought me back to joy in theater making. And there's a lot of reflection and looking back on, a lot of people and leadership I was looking up to who moved out of jealousy or spite and anger. And so I thought that's how I had to make art. And, I feel like your early 20s is you get to be the tortured artist because everyone told you this is what being an artist was. And it's a lie. You don't have to be tortured to be an artist. So I think if you walk away with anything from me, the thing that I want to share is that joy is just a much more renewable resource and fuel than spite is. And I think if, we're all here, we can all make money doing a lot more money doing something else. And I think what brings us all here is passion and like a deep desire to change the world and, ask big questions. And it's just because we love it. We still need to make money and ask for things, but we love it. And so we're allowed to be joyful, and yes, joy, joy, joy.
Love that. Quote, joy is a renewable resource. That is awesome. Thank you. And let's go to Michael.
Yeah. Uplifting everything that everyone has already said, and then also touching back on sort of something Alexis was talking about in terms of looking at our own personal power and our autonomy. She was talking about it in reference to contracts, but it's also just like, if I'm moving in this world and I'm looking around me at all times and looking above and looking below, then it becomes harder and harder for me to miss someone or to let something, slip through, any sort of cracks or holes or whatever in my thinking if I'm just looking around. So get into mutual aid, y'all. This goes for people of all classes, etc. There is something you can offer someone. Okay, I'm an unproduced playwright, but let me on every play I post on New Play Exchange include a requirement for a land acknowledgement at the start of my play. At the start of my play, that's the baseline. Boom, it has to be there. Oh, and you have to pay someone from someone indigenous from your theater's lands to help build the language around that. Oh, you are a rich board member of a theater company? Great, I bet you have a summer home. Can you create an artistic residency? Outside of coronavirus, can you partner with a theater company to just give some artist of color, a queer artist, any artist, just a week to live in that summer home? Because I promise it will engender so many possibilities for both you as the person giving to the community and for the person supposedly receiving, because they will give back in ways that you may not even imagine. Do you just have a printer? Do you have a printer? Print me my headshots one time, buy me dinner, take me out to groceries, get into ways of helping that are outside of the ways you think helping has to exist. It doesn't have to happen through systems. If anything, we've seen that systems failed us. So what if we look at that not in a frame of futility of, oh, I can't do this, I have to surrender to blah, 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 blah. No, let's innovate solutions, baby. Let's look at the community and see what the community is doing and how we can contribute to it, because we are a part of it, whether or not we talk about it or not.
Thank you. Print me my headshot. No, but thank you, Michael, really, everyone with amazing sentiments. And we are going to pass it on to the awesome and amazing, last but not least, Tanasia.
Thank you. Yeah, uplift everything. These people are amazing. Hire them. Number one. Number two is what I'll say is that I'm going to uplift a few things that my fellows have said and give a little bit more context to them. Pascal brought up Adrienne Maree Brown. Adrienne Maree Brown is an amazing cultural strategist. She has a book called Emergent Strategies. If any of you are interested in looking about different ways to reframing your thinking around talking to artists and the how of doing this work, please read that book. Number two, I'm going to uplift what Michael said about mutual aid. I do think, like, and Pascal knows this, I've been talking about commune living since this COVID situation has happened, right? And commune giving, and how do we get out of this capitalist structure that sets so much of this, it's the structure of so much of this turmoil, right? And the way we do that is figuring out how we can aid people and how we can have interactions or exchanges that are not money. Right? So how do I exchange paying for Michael's headshots for Michael buying me a drink, or for Michael, or you see, even that's capitalism, because like I'm right, it's wired in my head too. So like, how do we exchange it like in a different way? Michael reading a play of mine, right? And then giving me feedback on it, right? So how do we do that? Number one. And other things that I want to uplift is the how. The how is very important. How we treat people, how we treat like the room, how we set up the room, it is very important. So let's think about that. And number two, one thing that I do in all of my work is I try as a leader, I'm a leader because I empower those around me. I'm a leader because I empower Pascal to do all the amazing stuff that she does, that Alex to do all the amazing things that she does, Alexis to do all the amazing things that she does, John Meredith, and Michael, right? I empower all of them to do their work. And that is why I feel like I am seen as a leader. So if we can like boil this down to empowerment of people and empowerment of the like less enfranchised person in the room, how do we make them step into their power? And how do we create that process? So I'll say that. I think that's why people see me as a leader, and I'm just going to say the myth is broken, and now go out and empower people.
Out and empower people. Everyone watching, you go out and empower people. You go out and you affirm the person next to you. You affirm yourself. I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for all your thoughts, for your words, for being here. And you know, it's a lot to have these discussions and to get on Zoom and to do the laptop thing, but this is what it is now, and we're doing it, and I think we're doing a pretty good job. So let's keep it up. Thank you to SpeakEasy Stage for, you know, allowing us to be a part of this panel, for hosting this, and giving us the space to have this much needed discussion and this conversation that I hope is not going to end, that is going to continue, because, you know, we can't just talk about it, we got to be about it. So again, I want to say thank you to Alex, thank you to John Meredith, thank you to Michael Rosegrant, to Pascal Florestal, to Alexis Shear, to Tanasia Jones. Let me say Alex Lanati because I couldn't say everybody else's last name, did not say yours. But thank you to everyone who tuned in and who watched till the end. Just
thank you, Sabrina.
Yes, Sabrina, she's the best.
Hire her too. Extraordinaire amongst all other things.
Hire her. Hire all of us, but hire her too.
Hire us.
Hire us, hire her.
Well, that brings us to the end, and I love all your beautiful faces, and I can't wait to see you all again soon.
Thank you.